I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda, and you're listening to Hard Knock Life.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard Knock Life, comics, movies, and TV. Yeah.
Welcome to Hard Knock Life. I'm Keith Chow.
I'm Britney Monet.
Hi, I'm Dominic Ma. Hi, friends.
It's Britney, bitch. I missed you guys. I missed you guys. I feel like my life has been kind of, well, I went to 2 concerts. I can't say entirely.
Oh yeah, no, you were living your best life without us. What are you talking about?
But work was brutal, which I'm not gonna go into details. But if you know me, you know, like pretty much work has been brutal. But yeah.
But now you're back, and we get to talk about nerd shit.
Yeah, speaking of brutal work, I don't know if that's the appropriate segue.
That's a great segue.
Man, I was talking last week about how like Andor is the series that I've been watching episodes repeatedly because I like the craft. But this episode, I'm not watching it again. God damn, that
not because it was bad.
No, not because it was bad. That shit was bleak. I'm not watching that again anytime soon. Just filing away the plot points.
Well, I'll tell you what. Spoiler alert. The most haunting line in all of Star Wars might just be there are 12 soldiers on every floor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll cut to the ending. Yeah, it's good. How about that Andy Serkis?
I love Andy Serkis.
Stretching expectations. Very difficult part.
One of the best things to happen is people realizing Andy Serkis can play like without CGI. You know what I mean? Like for so long, you know, because he was Gollum and he was Snoke and he was Caesar, it was like, okay, he's a great motion capture actor. But, you know, giving him the opportunity to play Clow in the MCU and play Alfred and Batman, and now he's playing a Star Wars character. What's his name? I don't even know what his name. Nico or something? Kino, right?
Yeah.
He's just so I mean, I guess it makes sense if you're a CG actor, motion capture actor, you have to be super expressive. But usually when you think of expressive, you think of like almost like overreacting, I guess. But like there's something subtle about the way his like he deflates when he realizes like, holy shit, I'm never getting out of this prison.
Yes. Yeah, he's so good. I mean, I saw him in 13 going on 30. That was
that's right.
Like out of like CGI type of thing I've seen him in. But
that's right.
Yeah, just to really see him like, you know, do all these other roles, and this was just he's so good. Anytime his voice is also like nice to listen to, so it's just like, I don't know, he's a great addition to the show. And you know, obviously people are joking about the whole like Snoke thing, and
is it a joke? I feel like there are people who are literally who are honestly
joke.
No, but I feel like there are people acting who are like in like actually believing that he's like the basis for the Snoke clone or something like that. And
yeah, why not?
I'm sure, I guess, if you want to headcanon that, whatever. But like, what I love about this show is that it is, I mean, we've talked about this in the past. It's so far removed from like the other Star Wars stuff that it almost feels disconnected. But to me, it's probably the most Star Wars in the sense that it like really fills out the universe. Last week, we mentioned that it's kind of like the prestige TV version of Star Wars. Like I love what Dominic said is it's as if AMC did a Star Wars show. And to that end, like if it really is like this kind of like prestige TV version of Star Wars, I mean, you don't even have to be prestige TV. Mandalorian got a whole bunch of like Emmy nominations last year. But could this be the first time we get some Emmy nominations for acting? Because to your point about Andy Serkis, I feel like Diego Luna has been doing again, that subtle, just kind of powerful face acting, not even dialogue, right? Like the last episode, he said 3 words the whole show, and was some of the most powerful acting I've seen in Star Wars. So,
as both of you have basically said, it's the most prestigious we've seen from Star Wars. I don't know, and everyone is just so good. It's hard for like, I don't know. I feel like I overcompliment Star Wars too in general, so it's hard.
Well, let me ask you, Brittany, because you are like probably of the 3 of us the biggest Star Wars head, and you know, beyond just the films and TV, like that's kind of the extent of my fandom. I don't read the comics, I don't play the video games. You have a much deeper appreciation for the ancillary Star Wars media, right? You read the books, you watch the animated shows. Good for you for reading. The most I read is like my Twitter mention.
So you read books. So then we're going to ask you the hard intellectual questions, basically.
Yeah, exactly. You read the books.
I am totally unqualified.
Well, but and that actually leads to that's actually a good discussion point for later. I don't know if you've been watching Tales from the Jedi, but
Not yet.
there's a lot of controversy about that show contradicting some of the stuff in the books.
The Ahsoka book, which I haven't read that book. It's literally like right next to me. I haven't read it yet, but I hear it contradicts that book, but I don't know. I haven't read the book
Yeah.
yet.
Anyway, before we get to that, that's a whole other tangent we can talk about later. But someone who's got a deep appreciation, deep love for the entirety of Star Wars. I'm sure you've seen the complaints from some Star Wars fans that say like Andor's kind of boring. It does feel too slow. There's not enough action. It doesn't feel like Star Wars. It just feels like any other show on TV. Like, what do you think about that kind of criticism of Andor, where it's, there's not any lightsabers. There's no mention of the Force. There's no pew pew, right? Like, what do you think of that particular criticism?
I just feel like they don't watch enough stuff outside of Star Wars, maybe, because even in the books, like, it depends on what book you're obviously reading, but like, I don't know, there's not always pew pew going on every page in the books either. So I think it really just depends on how much they honestly watch outside of Star Wars, and even Marvel and DC. Like, how much other stuff do you watch? Like, do you watch The Crown, or do you watch, I don't know what else is more like quote unquote prestigious, but I think it comes down to how much other forms of art you are watching and reading, because there's nothing wrong with having a show that's more slowed down and breaking down the finer parts of what builds up the rebellion. And I think like Rebels is probably one of the best like Star Wars animated pieces in Star Wars media ever, just because it is another show that really takes its time with following a set group of rebels and just learning how many different sectors there are in the rebellion and just what it takes. And I feel like people have to realize like a rebellion takes time, and there's lots of things that go into it, and it's not just the let's go steal all the credits from like this place and like blow it up, or what is Saw Gerrera doing. Like, it's not all like just the fighting of it. And I think that's something that gets lost in Star Wars, that I don't know, and the relationships and building those are important too, and character development. I feel like that can't be forgotten in something that is supposed to be, lightsabers and mystical. Like, there got to be character building, and I feel like it just comes from people not watching and reading other stuff outside of the quote unquote geeky stuff.
In another way, I think Andor definitely violates every sense of previously established Star Wars as like, I want to say kid stuff. That's not exactly the right word. It's like simplified moral universe, and it doesn't feel like a fantasy. It is, well, it's definitely just not for kids. Let's say that. It's not.
Here's a good example, right? I mean, everyone knows I am the big toy collector, right? Video games is your thing, Dominic. Novels is your thing, Brittany. Toys is my thing.
Yeah.
And they've released a couple of images from like upcoming Andor action figures, and I gotta say, like, they're boring as shit. Like, I have no desire to buy the Vel action figure. Dominic maybe would want to buy the Vel action figure.
I totally want the Vel action figure
just because you love Vel, but as an action figure, it's kind of boring. The point is, like, they don't make for exciting action figures, right? But that's not a criticism. Because it's the same reason, like, I don't want to buy Sopranos action figures. I don't want to buy The Wire action figures, but I love those shows, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same feeling here. Like, I'm not out there pre-ordering all of the Andor figures. And that might be one of the reasons, like, Andor is not the most watched of the Star Wars shows. That was one of the things that came out over the last couple of weeks, is that it's one of the lower rated, or whatever ratings mean anymore.
Right, which is the most telling thing.
Right.
If we're saying that that's a real conflict of, classic fandom versus whoever may or may not be watching Andor. Yeah. And that's really unfortunate. Just goes to whatever, all the things you're just saying. Can you not take something that's a different level of, dialogue and mental work?
Yeah. What I also love too about Andor is that, to the point you were making earlier, Dominic, that it used to be that like Star Wars was fantasy Star Trek was sci-fi. Like, you know, you couldn't really call Star Wars sci-fi because it's about wizards and knights and things, right? It's really fantasy in space. But the thing that I think sets Andor apart from like traditional Star Wars, or like a Western in space, a lot of times it's either a Western or a fairy tale in space. But Andor is really hard sci-fi. Like if you think about the way that the prison system is built up, like we mentioned this a couple weeks ago, how it looks like THX 1138, right? Like it takes its cues from George Lucas's first film, where it's everyone's in white and it's all sterile, and you know, like even the kind of like the mental kind of, you know, game of each table building whatever it is they're building, and then the winning table gets flavor in their food and the losing table gets electrocuted, right? Like that's kind of a very like hard sci-fi kind of like an, you know, Ender's Game kind of feel to it, more so than like high fantasy, you know.
Yeah, we're not having that play set. That would be a messed up play set. I maintain that the thing they're doing in the work camp is actually making all the Star Wars toys parts. It's some factory in Malaysia. But anyway, sorry, that's besides the point. I did want to say that, like, okay, it's like when they set it up, I think in the first couple Andor episodes, there were a lot of elements of the Star Wars vocabulary that we know and love, like the droid, who is adorable, and big planets, big landscapes, and all this stuff. It's really in this last episode, this most recent episode, that it just like took a turn for, this is just utterly crappy and bleak. This is, you know, this is a story of being a prisoner of war. And so for me, I think that this last episode would be more like a point that would cut off some fandoms.
Yeah.
Then, because it just, and it's just so not cool, like the whole torture scene. And by the way, but at the same time, the whole thing, the whole actual method of the torture is such like a sublime, creepy, science fiction-y thing,
right? With the headphones,
Bix is horrible ordeal under the thing, and the way he explains it, it's this like the sound of this dying children of an alien species. That's such an awesome science fiction horror kind of idea. So they got that in there, you know, without, you know, so much more terrible than the like whatever the electrical prickly chair, which we've seen 2 or 3 times that Han Solo is hooked up to.
First, no, I for a second I thought they were going to pull out the thing that they put on Riz Ahmed's head in Rogue One, and I'm glad they did. I'm glad they didn't do that. But you know, talking about that torture scene of Bix, and you know, you've pointed out often when we were discussing Andor, just the filmmaking of it. And what I really thought was so haunting about that scene is that you don't hear what Bix hears, but what the camera does is zoom right in on her extreme close up. And again, just the beautiful acting in this show, her face, and then she lets out that blood-curdling scream, and then it cuts.
Yes.
And it cuts the way that A New Hope cuts when they torture Leia, right? It cuts to the feet walking away from the door. Like, it's a exact smash cut the way the new... Again, there's Star Wars DNA all over the show, but it takes it in a different direction.
So it calls that, but it so much surpasses that little floaty like droid with the hypodermic needle shit. And then again, just really quick on what you just said for the hard science fiction. Yeah, you can't hear what she hears because it's an entirely imagined science fiction thing. It's when science fiction is something outside of our human experience that we cannot even imagine, and some writer comes up with it. That's what is so like delicious about the idea, and at the same time so horrifying. So it's incredibly effective. Yeah.
The Mon Mothma scenes are another example of them building out the texture of Star Wars, because again, this is a character that's gotten some prominence over the years, right? Like she was essentially a cameo in Return of the Jedi. She has like one scene, but it was so affecting that they brought her back for Rogue. They actually brought her back for Episode 3 in a deleted scene. Like there's a deleted scene on the Blu-ray of Bail Organa, Padme, and Mon Mothma kind of like talking about, wow, this new Emperor guy kind of sucks, right? Like, and then you see like the early seeds of the rebellion there. But then she's in Rebels, she's in Rogue One, and played by Genevieve O'Reilly. This is the first time they turn Mothma into a real character. And just the scenes of her talking to her old friend, dealing with her daughter, but then learning that Vel is her cousin.
Yeah.
Where do you think of the way they're connecting what seemed like these disparate storylines?
I really like it, and I think like I always reference this book, but the Leia Princess of Alderaan book is such a perfect book to kind of read about the beginning of the rebellion, and at least for Leia's involvement, and just hearing all the conversations that she kind of like overhears between her parents and that what Bail and Mon Mothma are doing. I think that it's just kind of building upon this foundation that I've already kind of read in a way, but it's so interesting. I really like what they're doing with Mon Mothma, that she was a senator at what, 16, and how long she's been dealing with this, and just I'm waiting to see like actually where her and Belle like come together. If we're gonna see that on the show, I don't know, but I don't know. I think it's very interesting, and her husband gets on my nerves. He's so annoying. Oh my god, I cannot stand that man.
You ship her with the banker guy, right? Like that's they're clearly a couple in waiting, right?
The banker guy is suave.
Mhm.
I think he's gonna get killed though.
Also, that worm drink. What? You guys noticed that, right? I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, was that like some sort of tequila thing? Like
Yeah.
it's their delicacy.
But it,
Chandrillan
like, fries,
delicacy.
like when they put the worm in it, it fries it. I don't know if you've noticed that. Like,
Oh,
the
yeah.
worm
cool.
is fried in it.
makes for bubbly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's festive. And they keep doing the things, and it's like such a hard, contrast with the people in prison and the people like are really fucked up. They keep cutting to these like very aristocratic, senator types, and that just can't help but be affecting, in our current world context. Like, you're discussing it up here, and then this is what's happening down on the ground.
Which makes Vel even that much more interesting, because up until that point, like there was the scene when you see her on Coruscant and she's all cleaned up, but then you think, oh, she must be again undercover when she's on Coruscant meeting with Clea. And it's really interesting that the actress that they hired to play a character named Clea looks just like Carrie Fisher, but anyway.
Yeah, I heard Leia first, and then I was like,
clearly not Leia, because she's only like 15 in this time period, but I feel like if they need someone to play Leia again, they should just hire that actress, because goddamn, every time she's on screen, I'm like, is that Carrie? Anyway.
yeah, she's good.
But Vel, like, she's cleaned up in that scene, and then again, you don't realize like why she's so cleaned up on Coruscant other than that. And then when she shows up at the Mothma household, like, Dominic, what did you think of that? Like how they took a character like Vel, who was, yes, of the aristocracy, but is willing to get her hands dirty and almost died for the rebellion, and is willing to, at Mon Mothma's behest, or not even to her behest, right? Because she doesn't necessarily agree with she wants to settle this diplomatically, which was the conflict between her and Luthen in the previous episode.
Yeah. Well, it was a surprise. There was a lot of saucy dialogue at the table. It was very well done, suggesting it's queer lifestyles or not, keeping it a little under the table. But mainly it was that thing of like, Vel is kind of dabbling. She's like a dilettante in this rebellion thing. She's from the upper class, and can she make the true sacrifice? Can she, really be down to the people? That's a very interesting conflict. Or could she just walk away and go back to Coruscant and
right.
Have fizzly drinks?
Especially like in light of the conversation she had with Cinta in the previous episode, where Cinta's like, the rebellion comes before us. I'm not just some rich girl who can just go back to her. Like,
yeah, that's the whole point.
The real world analog is like the kind of like upper middle class activist who is able to, like, they may go to the protest with the sign to take the Instagram photo, but then they go right back home into their like, yeah.
Can you dip in and out of the rebellion?
Right.
No, we'll see. And then on the other side of serious blonde ladies, can we just talk about Deirdre Miro for a second? For Miss Miro is very fascinating.
I did not anticipate the Cyril stalking Deidre storyline. That was
so funny and so perfect.
He's so obsessed with like I understand, because I feel like the general understanding of him being like, you were right about something and no one believes you, and then you get in trouble, and you were right the whole time, makes it like, so I totally understand his motives, but God, dude, I don't know. Get a new hobby, please.
Cyril gives off very incel vibes, because, to your point about someone who's just kind of like, his mom is constantly putting him down. He's eating his blue cereal always. but he's got this like obsession. And it also honestly,
I don't want to
like,
go fully down the road because that is a broad stereotype of things, all at once. But he's unfulfilled.
well, right. But that's where I was going, that like, you know, he does glom on to Deidre because they do have a shared commitment to this thing. But I do feel like it does speak to the way people are radicalized towards fascism.
Yeah.
You know, because we talked about this last week, how it's not lost on me that they show him at the dinner table watching television. It's almost like the people watching Fox News telling you to hate this other group, you know?
Yeah.
That's why I get like these incel MAGA vibes from Cyril. And then he just gloms on again to the government official who's the one government official who's like, he's obsessed with. It's like, she's his Trump in a way, you know?
Yeah. It's an important picture to paint because, again, like, yeah, he's the guy who's not in a position of power. He's trying to get someone and he feels frustrated. He wants to be like a Grand Moff or something, and that is an important picture to get. And I think they're spending a little too much time trying to make it like the version of the incel trolley boy. I actually think they're being a little heavy-handed on that thing
with the mom. The constant badgering and
it's like the first time with the mom and the cereal we get it, and then the second time it's just like, gosh, we still with the mom and the cereal sucks. But then it's all great when it gets this sort of weird stalking scene again, and that's saying because like it's like a beautiful love scene. It's just so wrong in so many great ways because we've just seen Miro do one of the most terrible sadistic things ever done in Star Wars, maybe the most sadistic thing we've ever seen in Star Wars. And by now we've probably got used to the idea that I'm pretty sure she's consciously just got a perma frown expression on, like as an acting choice, because like if she like smiled or laughed for a second, she would be like kicked out of the ISP or something. So she's had to have this fucking, mask on. And the closest she comes to seeming to have like an emotion like, glee or satisfaction is when she's torturing Vix, by the way.
Right.
So that's how we know them. That's how we really know where the Empire folks stand. Is like there are people who don't get happy about anything except when we get to like torture somebody. And so we've seen her be as bad as she up to this point. We were kind of like, it was kind of questionable. She's like, oh, she's like a functionary in them.
You're kind of rooting for her almost, right?
Yeah, like she's getting shit done. We get it. She's one of those. And then she's just like, oh, you're a fucking shitty, terrible person. But of course that missed. And then so the unfulfilled like Empire guy, of course, is in love with her. He's like, oh, I would have the power that you have. I didn't get to be a full stormtrooper. Sorry.
The other real world analog too, if you think about the three main storylines, right? Because you have the Mon Mothma stuff, you have the Deirdre and Cyril stuff, and then you have the actual Andor stuff on the prison planet. But it is also a story of different classes, right? Because when we talked about the swanky apartment of the aristocracy, like where Mon Mothma and Luthen actually represent, right? Like the top level of Coruscant, and then Andor representing like the working class, Andor and Cinta and everyone on Ferrix, I think.
Oh, Ferrix, yeah.
Right? Like that's the working class. Like they're down on the ground, getting their hands dirty. Andor's in prison. He's representing like what it's like being in prison and being of like, again, the poor working class. And then you have Cyril and Deidre kind of in that, like, literally Cyril lives in the middle of Coruscant, the middle level of Coruscant. He's not on the top with the senators. He's not on the bottom with the prisoners. He's like right there. He's the middle class. He even wears a tie to work, right? He's in the cubicle farm. Like it's like, it's not lost on me the kind of like class struggles that they're showing in Star Wars, which again, it's kind of like the Canto Bight storyline in Last Jedi was hinting at.
Yeah,
is what they're really fleshing out.
Kind of like that.
Yeah,
you just have more time to mess with it, though.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you're very right that it's showing the different class structures and then how each people within those class structures react to either obviously joining a rebellion or, following the Empire. I think it does a really good way of highlighting that, and it's hard to tell. I think with what's her name, Deidre, yes. It's hard to tell if she's just someone who's like doing her job because it's like been instilled that he followed the Empire, or if like, she maybe would view it differently if she had more like, I don't know. I'm not sure what like where she's at, but I feel like Cyril for sure is like the fanatic of it. I don't know. I just
Yeah.
find them very,
It's hard to say.
very interesting.
Well, that's what's so beautiful about the show, right? Because it is so complex, right? Like honestly, it is what turns some people off, that it is so analogous to the real world. But
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like Star Wars has always been that, right? Like
Yes.
from Jump Street, Lucas says, like, you know, I was inspired by like World War II and Vietnam and all these things are like embedded in Star Wars from the beginning. So people who, I mean, this has been an issue beyond Andor, but like the trolls on the internet who complain about Star Wars being political or Star Wars being woke, like it's been that way from the beginning.
Been.
It's about war. Like, come on.
A lot of things for like that we consume in, you know, geek nerdy culture has always been political, whether or not you would want to see it. It's always been there.
Yeah.
Like they always talk about Superman. Like obviously.
Famous social justice warrior Superman.
Yeah, like so many people that they read comics of or just read stories are, you know, stories that are kind of anti-establishment, and people refuse to see it even though it's been like ingrained into those like things for like so long. And I feel like because Andor isn't shying away from it and isn't making it as like metaphorical, I guess you could say, like it's just in your face that this is what's going on and these are the power structures and this is the rebellion, and obviously the Empire is very bad. Like they're making it very clear like that's what's going on, and I think it's bothering people because a lot of people maybe used to think that the Empire wasn't as bad, you know, and I feel like they're realizing maybe they're on the wrong side of things, and it's upsetting them that, you know, they maybe are the bad guys when they look at it. I don't know, that could be it.
Well, I mean, we are, by the time this podcast airs, one day away from an election where fascism is on the ballot.
Yes.
What Andor is, again, showing is how easily normal as people can fall into fascism. Because say what you will about Cyril, like he represents a normal middle class person in Star Wars. He worked for a corporation and got fired, moved in back in home with mom to be radicalized by Fox News, gets another desk job and gets obsessed with the right-wing government and how they're you know, stopping the steal. You know what I mean? Like to me, the parallels between how one becomes MAGA is so clear in his storyline in particular, that he believes he's right. Like I knew about Andor from the beginning. I believe in law and order.
Yep.
And law and order is since the Nixon administration, at least, has always been dog whistle for right-wing politics, you know. I mean, maybe it's just me, but the idea that like Star Wars hasn't always been kind of progressive in its politics. I mean, not even the original trilogy, the prequels. Anakin says, "You're either with us or you're against us," like quoting George Bush. You know, like it was ridiculous at the time, but like, you know, Obi-Wan saying, "We believe in democracy," but like it seemed ridiculous 20 years ago. But I want to stand up on like a volcano and shout to the world, "You were supposed to believe in democracy." Because I feel like America's like, you know, fucking like Anakin right now is just like throwing a hissy fit and is willing to burn the shit down to the ground because milk is $8.
I'm trying to think about how many credits Blue Milk is right now, so this is a segue, but it's probably up there. I want to say another thing about this episode, which is interesting. We talked about the structure before and how they had these sort of 3-episode mini movie structures for a while. It would kind of plays you a little bit because by that structure, one would think he'd have busted out of the jail in this episode. But in fact, oh no, this problem is a very serious problem and it's going to last for a while, presumably towards the climax finale of this season. And I just want to say that because this episode was all the way a bummer. It's all the way let down, but in the perfect way, it's ramping up the problem.
Right, because the biggest climax was getting Kino to finally admit, oh, this isn't how it's going to go. It's about the beginning of rebellion. And the prison is a microcosm for what's happening outside. And again, that story structure is just so perfect. It's so well written. I don't know. You're either with this show or against it, or you're my enemy, is how I feel.
Well, but that's okay. But again, that's not really it, because they're going out of their way to show the subtleties of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
yeah, absolutely.
more so than other Star Wars. Again, what I like is it breaks down this sort of dark versus light thing, which is mythological and beautiful, but simplified, you know.
Not to always drag The Last Jedi into this, but that's kind of why people reacted so strongly against The Last Jedi.
Right. It got uncomplicated for a second, and it
Right. They were trying to paint in the gray, and that made people upset. Because I feel like the only place the sequel trilogy should have gone and could have gone was to say there has to be a balance between light and dark. Where Anakin fell was, again, he believed that you're either light or you're dark. And really the true balance of the Force is finding somewhere in between light and dark. And that's where they were going with the sequels until there was this shit show reaction to Last Jedi. And they did a complete 180 and was like, oh no, it's all fine. We're all, you know, like that's kind of, again, where Andor is living in that gray area. Because, you know, the thing about rebellion, we said this from the beginning, like, one man's rebel is another man's terrorist, right? Like America is simultaneously the rebellion and the evil empire. Like however you watch Star Wars, you know, America's both, you know, and that's the thing about the push and pull and the struggle of the two poles in this country, right?
No, it was fun to, again, not watching that one again. No, I live with elderly parents. I don't want the whole thing of that guy expiring while in prison is, you know, that's some Breaking Bad shit. That's like,
oh yeah, we didn't even talk about the poor guy who was like 3 days away from getting out.
Yeah, but that's when they find out that he was gonna get out, even if he was gonna, quote unquote, survive what was going on with him, that he would have just been reshuffled into another place, which is horrible to find out. They're just like reshuffling people.
Right. Yeah. I'm actually sad that there's only 3 episodes left because I could watch the show go on forever. Fortunately, it sounds like they're still committed to the second season because last week I was a little worried with all of the talk.
They already started filming it.
Have they? Well, that's good. Well, you know, I was worried with all the talk about it being so low rated that Lucasfilm would pull the plug, but I'm glad that they're committing to the second season. So anyway, we're going to take a break. After the break, we're going to talk about another little thing that's about to come out, and that's Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Guess what? Goalie Nutrition is sponsoring Hard Knock Life, and you can go to goalie.com to buy apple cider vinegar gummies. They're ashwagandha gummies, superfruit gummies, and super greens gummies, and you get 10% off plus free shipping if you use the code HARDKNOCK at goalie.com. This is honestly, I've been taking the goalie gummies now for a couple weeks, and I have to say they're tasty and they're good for you. Have you guys been enjoying the goalie gummies?
I really like them. They're yummy, but it's a nice to add to my like routine of already, like, I normally take just straight vitamin C, so it's nice to have like extra supplements.
For a long time, people have praised the benefits of apple cider vinegar. And, you know, as someone who's had to like drink straight apple cider vinegar sometimes when I'm not feeling well, or, you know, I have some joint pain and your mom is like, drink some apple cider vinegar. It's not the most appetizing home remedy, let's just say.
Right.
It tastes horrible.
So, like, the apple cider part is like, ooh, does it taste like apple cider? And it's like, no, it tastes like vinegar. But ACV is very good for you. And the fact that Goalie has been able to put the ACV into these tasty little gummies made with pectin and fruit peels, which make them vegan, which is cool. So if you're vegan, you can still rock these gummies, because everyone knows gummies are usually made out of like gelatin and nasty shit. These are made out of complete non-GMO, gelatin-free, gluten-free, vegan ingredients, and you can get the benefits, all of the benefits of apple cider vinegar, taking these tasty, delicious, convenient gummies. So go to goalie.com and use the code HARDKNOCK, that's HARDNOC, just like the podcast you're listening to. Get 10% off your purchase of Goalie products and free shipping.
It's a much better delivery device for that apple cider vinegar.
Yeah.
These Goalie gummies are great. You get it, and it's a delicious little candy. And I've been enjoying the Superfruits one. I did feel kind of refreshed after taking a few of those.
Yeah, no, but I'm loving them so far, and they're definitely tasty. If you just want tasty gummies, at least just eat them for the yumminess.
Yeah. So go to goalie.com, use the code HARDKNOCK, HARDNOC, get 10% off your purchase and free shipping at goalie.com with the code HARDKNOCK. Actually, it's going to be hard to talk about Wakanda Forever because I'm on a strict no clips, no more TV spots, no more trailers diet.
I've been doing the same. So, yeah.
Well, I don't think we have to talk about the clips, the content we don't know yet,
Okay.
but our feeling of anticipation for Black Panther's coming out this week. I don't know. I have plans to see it on Thursday, like one of the earliest normal showings that one can see. Do you have plans to see it this week?
Oh yeah, I have my tickets are for Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Mine are for Thursday too. So I'm going at 8:00, seeing it at the Santa Anita movie theater, just in case anyone knows where that is at. Maybe you'll see me. So
Right on. I think it's really worth talking about their feelings up to this point when it is not out in the public yet, because I mean there just couldn't be a bigger deal in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well as just in pop culture in general. I mean, you know, again, like flashback 5 years ago or whatever it was. First, we hadn't had we hadn't quite had Trump disaster and pandemic and every other goddamn thing.
Well, the Trump disaster was
Yeah, that was well on its way. Okay, sorry, that was well on its way, but we didn't know that Black Panther would change the world. Like
Yeah.
I always do this thought experiment of like, you know, in the MCU, like Black Panther could have just been okay. It could have been just like Ant-Man. Like, you know, maybe like Wesley Snipes played him forever as he was signed up to do it 1 year, and like, you know, he fights Claw in red suit or whatever. It could have been just like okay, and that would have been okay. But it was so much more than okay, and it changed the world. So I think like, but now it has the sequel, and the unimaginable problem of not having the lead actor it's had in the first movie to change the world, and then all this other shit that's happened in the world. Oh my god!
right.
I just like thinking about it.
What's really fascinating too is that the press junkets have been happening. Ryan Coogler's been doing the rounds, and he gave an interview where he revealed what the original story was going to be before Chadwick passed away. Like, it was still going to be about grief because it was still going to exist in a post-blip world. You know, like the idea of Wakanda grieving. Because remember, Black Panther got dusted at the end of Infinity War and was gone for that 5 years. So a lot of what the original script of Black Panther Wakanda Forever was going to be about T'Challa feeling out of place and having been gone and readjusting, and the grief of all the people who died and came back, and how people moved on and didn't move on. So grief was always a part of the script. Namor apparently was always part of the script, but his passing really did throw a wrench into the story, because one, Coogler almost quit because he almost said, I can't do this without Chadwick.
yeah.
You know, and I know that like there are still some grumblings about not recasting, particularly in light of the news of Harrison Ford being the new Thunderbolt Ross. And people are saying that like, well, why can you recast him, but you can't recast T'Challa? This is a conspiracy.
Okay, that's very false equivalency.
Well, it is. I mean, even I think using the Batman or the James Bond analogy is false equivalency, because Chadwick Boseman was unreplaceable. And to have this movie come out where you just pretend some new guy was Chadwick, I think would have just felt wrong at this point. I think you do this movie, and then Black Panther 3 can be about the multiverse, T'Challa joining the MCU. But you couldn't do that in this movie.
No, not at all.
Especially if grief was embedded in the story. How are you going to have whoever the replacement actor would have been playing T'Challa, talking about grief and losing your loved one, knowing that Chadwick Boseman was gone? I feel like there was just no way you could have succeeded in doing that.
No, and I've said it before that like it would have been the same weird situation that like The Rise of Skywalker was in, where like I think the movie was in a way hindered by using the old scenes of Carrie Fisher, unfortunately. I really do. And it's not a disrespect to Carrie Fisher, because I love Carrie Fisher, but I feel like trying to rebuild the movie around those scenes affected it, as well as obviously all this the backlash from Last Jedi. But like I do think in some good of the story was hindered by that. And I think if they tried to recast, like we said, if they recasted Carrie Fisher, probably wouldn't have been right. And I think to also ignore that Carrie Fisher was no longer with us was also like a problem. Like, you know, it wasn't
Right, killing Leia off screen would have been hard too. But that's essentially what they do with T'Challa, is they kill him off screen.
They have to.
I mean, I don't know.
I mean, the only thing they
don't
could
know,
do would
Yeah.
be a stunt double or something, and then it's like, we know it's supposed to be him, and
Right.
whatever,
I mean, because you could
you
get
know.
away with that, I suppose, since you just have a digital Black Panther. But I don't know. Like, again, having not seen the film yet, I don't know how they deal with the death of Black Panther. But
Yeah.
there's something to me feels a little wrong too, to see like a digital Black Panther die.
I mean, using like just his normal stunt double where we wouldn't have noticed, and it's like,
Just I think seeing T'Challa, I feel like it's almost easier to accept having him die off screen. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just, to me, it would just be upsetting. You've already seen T'Challa die in Infinity War, and that was upsetting
Yeah.
already. Like
Mhm.
I didn't get a chance to interview the cast. We do have interviews with the cast coming up on our YouTube channel this week. But if I did have the opportunity to talk to Denai, especially because she had to play before
Yes.
all this happened,
Mhm.
the loss of T'Challa, right? Because she's
Yeah.
there
Mhm.
when he dusts.
Sure.
And that scene is probably the most powerful
Oh,
at the
yeah,
end of Infinity War. She just loses it when he dusts away.
Mhm.
To do a whole movie in that mindset, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know. And I seen so many of the cast just saying how they would not have want anyone else to be in the role, that I just feel like it's disrespectful for people who did not personally know Chadwick and who did not work with him on the project to say that, that they should have recast him, because like it's like the people who worked with him and knew him were not on board with that. So it's like, no, like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just, I understand that it's frustrating when it's such an iconic character, but it's very disrespectful, I think.
Dominic, why don't you explain why it's false equivalency to use Thunderbolt Ross as the analogy for recasting?
I was kind of making fun of you. I just think you like mentioning that news item more than every time I hear it. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. Like,
It is
just
kind of a
about-
giggle-inducing to know Harrison Ford will be in the MCU.
That is a
by
side
itself.
issue where I think that Harrison Ford in all movies going forward, in like big action movies, is kind of elder abuse, and like he's earned his
This is like a Bruce Willis
He's
situation.
earned his peace, and he shouldn't have to like do that shit. But anyway, so that's why I think there are two like different universes of problem. But I wanted to say was like one of the things I'm looking forward to. I just wanted to ask you guys what you were looking forward to in general. But when you mentioned the thing of what the script was originally premised on, the grief after Thanos kills half the universe, like what I'm looking forward to is, okay, someone commented kind of, justifiably, that one problem with Marvel movies is that everyone acts like teenagers because they don't have real relationships. I don't know who said this. Was like Martin Scorsese or someone. but the idea that they don't do so much of stuff with people who are married or have actual kids or have brothers and sisters and mothers, fathers. Of course, they do that to some degree in WandaVision, but they don't do a lot of it. And yes, and everyone were missing those what we recognize as human relationships ends up acting like teenagers, like what's costume should I wear? Let's joke around and beat up the robot. Except notably for Black Panther, where more than some of the other Marvel movies, we can say that there's a real attention to the family at the core of the royal family of Wakanda. It's like he loses his dad. Then there's this very interesting relationship with his, geeky sister. And then so when it was the prodigal son of the family passes away. I mean, I'm really looking forward to what Angela Bassett is going to do in this movie. I guess I'm saying, just that was a long way to saying, like the actual things of losing a father, and then this movie, a mother losing a kid. These are real things that people can recognize.
I mean, there's already talk of Angela Bassett perhaps getting an Oscar nomination for this film, like that she really is the emotional core of the movie. I mean, you can get that from the trailer, right? Like Ramonda is probably like, I'm in a weird place with this movie because like I don't want to say I'm not looking forward to it, because I'm clearly looking forward to this film. But it's also like I'm not ready to like sob for 2 hours and 45 minutes, but I feel like the moment the lights go down, I'm just going to start crying. And then like for the next 3 hours, just be a fucking emotional wreck.
It could happen.
You know, I mean, I'm welling up thinking about it, you know? It's not the same feeling I had going into Black Adam. You know what I'm saying? Like there's like an underlying sense of dread underneath the excitement and anticipation.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Like,
Sure.
you know, and like there's no end credit scene, which I think is appropriate.
Yeah, spoiler. Just
Sorry.
kidding. Non-spoiler, spoiler and negative.
Well, it's, in a way, like it let people know that you can leave after the mid-credit roll, right? Because you don't have to sit through the whole thing, unless again you want to pay respects to the people who made the movie for you. But
Right, the traditional reason why we watch the credits.
right, there's no tease for Quantumania at the end, is what I'm saying. I feel like the end credit scene has been a bit of like kind of like fluff for the last several Marvel movies anyway. Like the mid-credit sequence is the one that matters. The end credit doesn't really matter, right? Because like it was Pizza Papa and Doctor Strange.
Yeah, they've been really tacked on and silly.
Right. They're usually jokes. So I think it makes sense that the last time Marvel didn't have an end credits was Endgame.
Yeah.
This feels like an Endgame. And it is, right? It's a culmination of phase 4.
And really, Marvel, it's okay to phase out that tradition. Mid-credit scene is cool. The very end of the credits, you're making all those, ushers at the movie theater staff work so hard. They have to freaking wait for the whole credits for people to leave and then do their cleanup thing. They'll be thankful for you if you cancel out the second of the end credits thing. Anyway, it's a minor technical detail.
One other thing from Black Panther that I'm excited for is that this movie has gotten Ta-Nehisi Coates to host a podcast for the first time ever. And I know people have been wanting a Ta-Nehisi Coates podcast for a long time, but he's hosting the official Wakanda Forever podcast. The first episode's already out, or at least a preview of the first episode's out. I think the very first episode drops this week. And then the remaining 5 episodes of Wakanda Forever, the official Black Panther podcast, drops in January, and it'll lead up to the 5th anniversary of the Black Panther movie. So I'm excited for the Wakanda Forever podcast. And like I said, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who has, of course, experience writing Black Panther, hosting a podcast has been like on my want list for a long time. So the fact that it's doing it over Black Panther is also very exciting. So anyway, Brittany Monet, what's nerd popping?
So this band that I like called Shreemore, they are from Baltimore, by the way. They released their first feature-length album called Spiritual Ascension. Lead singer is Trey, who he is a Black man who also sings and raps. So they're like really cool. So if you like pop punk and maybe kind of like a little bit of rap, you might really like them. They're really cool. I'm seeing them again in December because the first time I saw them was when I saw Broadside back in July. They're really cool dudes. I had bought their vinyl of their EP that they had at the time, and they're super cool. So check them out. And this isn't really nerd popping. It's kind of a more sad thing, but I was a huge fan of Aaron Carter growing up. So rest in peace, Aaron Carter.
Yeah.
I really hope that he finds peace. Sorry to make it sad for us.
No. I mean,
he just passed away like the other day. Wow.
We were already talking about grief, and that was welling up earlier. So yeah, it's a sad ending. For sure. Yeah. R.I.P. Aaron Carter. He was only 34, right?
34. Yeah. I was a huge fan. There was a point where he was following like a lot of different fans on Twitter too. So like me and him had followed each other for a little bit and got into a petty argument and followed each other. But I still always really liked him and wished him well. So it's sad that things turned out the way they did. But yeah. But I hope y'all check out Shreemore because they're really great. They're fun.
Cool. Dominic, what's nerd popping?
Nerd popping, I don't know, but might be a complicated one, depending on which state you live. Like, there may be more at stake, but like our politics are very complicated. But like, I just think Trump and his copycats really make it uncomplicated in a nice way, and just like those people are just assholes, and to affirmatively vote for them is ridiculous. I mean, I'm not even here going like, vote. If you're going to affirmatively vote for Trump and his ilk and his copycats, don't vote. That's fine. Don't affirmatively vote for those people. Vote for the other guys, or don't vote, or vote for your, special third-party candidate that you like. But that's my uncomplicated version of our political situation at the moment. Everything else is very complicated, but it's really simple to not affirmatively vote the fucking assholes who don't even want us to have a voting process. Anyway, that's what that's been popping with me.
I'm actually was going to say the same thing, maybe not in that particular way, but I think one of the things that's so frightening about election day tomorrow is that we are on the precipice. I mean, you know, we spent the first half of this podcast talking about facing down fascism and then succumbing to it. And I feel like that's where we are right now. Primarily, and I completely understand that people who are feeling the pain at the pump or feeling, you know, inflation at the grocery store, who are upset that cost of living is so much higher than it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. To Dominic's point, voting for the fascists is not going to help you economically. Inflation is not going to go down if Kevin McCarthy is Speaker of the House. Inflation is not going to go down if a bunch of Republican election denying secretaries of state control the voting process for the rest of time. Because the whole point is that they want to be able to select who's in power. The fact that we are this close, like, I think Dominic's absolutely right. It is not complicated.
That part is not complicated. There are many complicated layers underneath, and I get it. If you don't want to vote for Democrats, I get that. Totally get it. But don't do this thing of vote for the Republicans who are just clearly idiots. Anyway,
it's not even about no.
It's
I don't.
Complicated.
No, they're not idiots. That's the thing.
Well,
we can't dismiss them as idiots. No, they are.
Some are idiots, but
no, they're not. They're not idiots. I think that we dismiss
fight with
them.
you.
No.
Trump is a low IQ person.
Well, Trump's not on the
Many
ballot.
very dumb people.
Trump isn't, but they're not on the
anyway,
ballot.
This is neither here nor there.
No. I do want to make the point that these people are not stupid. Yes, Trump's incompetence is what prevented us from falling into fascism 2 years ago. But
Sure,
to your point about his acolytes, if all of his acolytes are in power after tomorrow, like as incompetent and as stupid as Donald Trump is intellectually, Steve Bannon is not stupid, right? Like these people know what they're doing. No, but I want to make it clear that we can dismiss them as stupid, but they know if they're in power, that's it. That's the ball game. If we are then we got to start like planning Aldani heists and blowing up Death Stars. I mean, really, it's as simple as that. That is uncomplicated. And what I was saying earlier is that voting for them is not going to help you financially. Your taxes, the people listen to, and here's the thing, people listen to this podcast who are especially listening to the 55th minute of this podcast. We're preaching to the choir. If you're listening to the Nerds of Color podcast at the 58-minute mark, one, you're probably my brother. So I'm talking to you, Raven, or Dominic, your family, and you're probably already voting for Democrat. What we need you to do, if you're listening to this, is tell your relatives who are not voting for Democrats to either vote for the Democrat or don't vote. Dominic's point. Either vote for the Democrat or stay home.
I realize that's a harsh way to put it, but I wanted to uncomplicate it.
It's true. If you're in Georgia, put it this way. If you're listening to this podcast in Georgia, vote for Raphael Warnock, vote for Stacey Abrams, vote for Bean Wynn, or don't vote, right? If you're listening to this podcast,
or vote for somebody else. Don't vote for just don't vote for the GOP.
Just don't vote for Herschel Walker.
I'm sure there's some other third party candidates that you might have a complicated reason for voting for, and that's cool.
Or put it this way, if you're planning to vote for Herschel Walker, vote for the third party guy. But if you're thinking because if you're thinking about voting for Warnock, don't vote for the third party. If you're even tacitly thinking about voting for Stacey Abrams,
again, it's complicated.
Vote for Stacey Abrams. But if you're like, that Herschel Walker, I like his badge, vote for the third party guy or stay home. If you're listening to this podcast in Wisconsin, vote for Mandela Barnes. If you're listening to this podcast in Pennsylvania, vote for John Fetterman. If you're listening to this podcast in Arizona, vote for Katie Hobbs and Mark Kelly. Otherwise, I know it sounds kind of hyperbolic. Democracy is on the ballot. To quote Obi-Wan Kenobi, you were supposed to believe in democracy, America. And we don't want to see liberty die with thunderous applause. God, Revenge of the Sith really was prophetic. Shout out to the prequels. Anyway, Brittany, how can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at Hi Brittany Monet on Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr, because I don't know if Twitter is officially going down. I'm going to go down with the ship. I will say that. But Twitter, Instagram, and now Tumblr are probably the places where you can find me if you are trying to connect with me socially.
Cool. Dominic.
Yeah, that's going to be a point. It's going to be interesting Twitter time. But for the moment, I'm Dama, DOMMAH, at Instagram or Twitter.
You can find me on Twitter for now at the real Chow, _real_Chow. It may or may not have a blue check by the time you listen to this podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at Real Keith Chow. Follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color, and go to hardknockmedia.com for all of the podcasts in the Hard Knock family. Check out our videos at youtube.com/the Nerds of Color. Support us on patreon.com/the Nerds of Color, and buy our merchandise at TeePublic. And again, please vote for the Democrats wherever you live if you're listening to this podcast.
Again, okay, sorry. It's not really important. We're having a good faith debate. What I really wanted to say is don't vote for Republicans.
Right.
That would make the complicated thing yield some interesting, not terrible results. I'm not even saying vote for Democrats. I'm really saying don't vote for the Republicans, any of them. They're all in the same boat now. So you can confidently not vote for any of them. And beyond that, do whatever you want. But that's my opinion. Keith articulated a more political, strategically useful version of that opinion.
The only reason I am troubled by that is that if you're a progressive person on the left and you decide, you know what, pox on both their houses, we're fucked. We need progressive leftists who hate Democrats too to still vote for the Democrat. Because if those folks stay home, you know all the MAGA folks are going to come out.
That's true too. That's true too.
That's what I'm saying. Hold your fucking nose and vote for Democrats. That's all.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, yes, they suck. Yes, they are not good. But they suck for
that's where it's complicated.
Yeah. Anyway.
But right, voting is good, so just vote, whatever. I mean, that's the most complicated thing to say.
This is so chaotic.
It is a bit. Wakanda Forever.